Talk and text line at 1-877-794-1973. That's 1-877-794-1973.
If I'm in this crummy situation, let's make content out of it.
The Matt Schneidman Show is brought to you by Potawatomi Sportsbook. Bet above the rest.
Never go corporate. Always go local.
With Hunter Baumgart, here's Matt Schneidman on the game.
See how Hunter changed that intro, Doug? And then right when he changes the intro, he decides to go off and call high school basketball tonight.
I know. I actually heard it for the first time last week, and I'm like, all right, he got around to it. So good for him. I am now officially the guest host or co-host for Hunter. Yeah, he's got Oconomowoc taking on Kettle Moraine tonight out at Oconomowoc. So that is where he is at. So here I am.
Listen, Doug Russell is always the OG co-host on this show, and there's nothing that can change that. We got a lot to get into. Let's get right to it. Lions 34, Packers 31. We're going to start this Friday's show as we do any day after game show. You know what time it is. It's time now for our final judgments presented by Habush, and Rotier. And I wrote this on The Athletic this morning. I think my biggest takeaway from the game from a 30,000-foot view is the Packers are a very good football team. That's the exact terminology Matt LaFleur used after the game. Very good. I don't think they're a great team yet. They have the potential to be, and I would not be stunned if they beat every team they face in the playoffs. Well, maybe I would be stunned just because winning the Super Bowl would kind of be surprising, but I give them a puncher's chance against anybody in the NFC. They are a very good football team. They have an opportunistic defense. Not so much last night. We'll get into that a little bit later. They have an offense that can go punch for punch with anybody. Their special teams are solid. They can beat anybody. But there is something to be said for teams that make plays in big moments. And last night, Christian Watson's offensive pass interference, agree with it or disagree with it, they called it. That was the Packers not coming up in a big moment. The Lions converting that insane decision to go for it on 4th and inches from the Packers, I believe it was 21-yard line.
Nuts.
That up. We'll get into that decision later too. That is the difference. Great teams execute those plays, and very good teams fall just a little bit short and settle for 3 instead of 7. So my final judgment is that the Packers are a very good football team, but they're not quite on the Lions level. But that's not to say they can't get there when it matters most next month. Because I truly do believe, like Kenny Clark and others were saying in the locker room last night, everyone thinks they're going to be playing in Detroit in the divisional round or the NFC Championship game. I would not be surprised at that at all.
I wouldn't be surprised by it either. Now, does my final judgment have to be a Packers final judgment? Because my final judgment is on Dan Campbell. And I think he's...
Sure.
Dan Campbell is going to cost his team in a big moment, again, period. That riverboat gambling nonsense from last night, that was the most insane call that a head coach has ever made. And it worked out. No question. It worked out. That was coaching malpractice. What he did. He's going to cost his team again in a big moment by just, you know what? This is what we do. It's not smart. It's unnecessary. And it has already bitten them in the ass. And it's going to again.
You are entitled to your opinion. That's why we call it our final judgments on this show. And we're allowed to have different ones. I don't think it's malpractice. I think it's risky. Malpractice would probably, in my definition of the word, would be something without any reason behind it. Dan Campbell's reason is that he's worried about Jordan Love against his defense, going down the field and kicking a field goal with no timeouts and 40 seconds left. He had every right to be with how they were moving the ball down the field in the second half. So I get the process behind the decision. I do have the sense, and this is not me being a hater. This is the official Packers station, but I'm not a Packers fan. I'm an objective reporter. I don't care who wins the games. I just care how many people see my stories and watch this show. There is the sense that something like this could come back to bite Dan Campbell when it matters a lot more than it did last night. But you got to give him credit for having the stones to do it last night in the biggest moment of the game and his team executing despite their quarterback tripping on the handoff. Earlier in the game, when they went for it on 4th and 1 from the 31, that was probably a more sound process because it's 4th and 1. How hard is it to get 1 yard?
Well,
Quay Walker made a great play. You could question the play call because to have a toss to make Jahmyr Gibbs cover that much ground for 1 yard, we've talked about it with the Packers this year, where Jaden Reed's running end arounds in the red zone. The play call was probably questionable, but Quay Walker made a great play regardless. I wouldn't say it's malpractice by Dan Campbell, but I do have a little bit of a sense that he's living dangerously with this. And it cost him in the NFC Championship game last year, correct?
Yeah, against 49ers.
Right. So, listen, I don't think you're far off with that. I think that's a fair assessment. And I think that might be the sense that a lot of people have regarding Dan Campbell. But hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well,
and they're 12-1 right now.
Sure. And they got to the NFC Championship game last year. But then again, I would come back and ask, well, how did that work out for them? The only thing that I would say is I hope that Matt LaFleur or any other coach doesn't try to emulate that, because I think Dan Campbell is one of one when it comes to that kind of stuff. And when you try to emulate somebody else's, I use the word malpractice, you can say risky, however you want to couch it in your own mind, or if you think it was a great move. Listen, if you're a Lions fan, you probably are sick of, you can go all the way back to, Bobby Ross or Wayne Fonts or any of the other, Steve Mariucci, any of the coaches that they've had over the years, Rod Marinelli, that have presided over bad Lions teams. And you've got this guy in Dan Campbell who, before he ever won a game, he won the press conference because he's like, listen, you don't want to hear coach speak. I don't want to give you coach speak, but here's what we're going to do. And we're just going to go down there. We're going to bite your kneecaps. We're going to get up. We're going to be a tough out every single time. And he talked Detroit very, very well, very effectively. Now, there were a lot of fans who were like, all right, yeah, here we go again. But then he went out and backed it up. And this team does take on his personality. Great. Honestly, I think that Detroit needed that. But now when you've got an elite team, there's a difference between trying to coach guys up into being tough and being great, as opposed to having great players and a great team. Right now, Dan Campbell has great players and a great team, and they need somebody making great decisions. And I don't think he made a great decision last night. They'll run through a wall for him, and that's an intangible that is priceless, which is fantastic. And I give him all the credit in the world for that. I think it was a bad decision that he made last night. It worked out, but it's still a bad decision.
Fair enough. And those are our final judgments presented by Habush and Rotier. National reputation, hometown service. Go to habush.com. Now, let's get into the weeds of this game. The first thing Matt LaFleur mentioned when he was giving his postmortem in his opening statement last night was that the offense got off to a slow start. And it did. And you can attribute blame to that. But I think the defense is far more at fault. They let up a season-high 34 points. The offense scored 31. The run defense was good. 3.3 yards per carry allowed on 34 rushes against that team. I just got done rewatching the game. They were pretty stout, especially in some goal line scenarios against the run. Kenny Clark, Colby Wooden, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, Aaron Mosby. Guys were getting after it against the run. I think the Packers' run defense is for real. They've held the Lions under 4 yards per carry in both games they've played, and the Lions have had over 30 rushes in both games. That's really good. Pass defense was terrible. That's where the Packers lost this game, I think. Couple stats for you. The Packers had a 27.9 pressure percentage, according to True Media, meaning they pressured Jared Goff on 27.9% of his dropbacks. He had 42 passing attempts. That's not good. There are only 2 teams in the NFL with a worse pressure percentage on the entire season. Their sack rate, 2.4%. That would be the worst in the entire NFL. Every other NFL team has a higher sack rate on the entire season. Matt LaFleur said after the game, Jared Goff just had too much time. And guess what? Jared Goff's an accurate quarterback. They're good at play action. They got receivers who can get open. They got receivers who can run after the catch. That's going to kill you. And it did. Guys were wide open. And when they were tasked with making contested catches, they did. How many times did we see last night, Doug, that little stop route? Amon-Ra St. Brown or Tim Patrick runs 6 yards, turns around, and he's right there, nobody around him. Whether it's zone or man, it's just easy.
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs beats Isaiah McDuffie on the angle route on the 4th and 2 touchdown. And McDuffie said after the game when I asked him about it, he said he should have just let Gibbs go out to the flat, but Gibbs got leverage on him and cut back inside on the angle route. Touchdown. Tim Patrick. Eric Wilson follows Amon-Ra St. Brown out to the flat when Keyshawn Nixon already is. Tim Patrick just sits down in that little open pocket. Touchdown. The thing that got the Packers the most, though, were screens. Dump-offs. Quick screens. Kenny Clark said they screened us to death. Matt LaFleur talked about how big of a problem that was. McDuffie, too. Packers were not able to get off their blocks. And credit to the Lions for getting their guys in space, the pass catchers reading where the blocks were, setting up their blocks. You have Penei Sewell just bodying Eric Stokes downfield. You have bigger players turning Xavier McKinney around 5-10 yards downfield. You have offensive linemen climbing to the second level on Isaiah McDuffie, Javon Bullard, receivers doing their part blocking on DBs. They screen them to death. And guess what? I think I tweeted the Lions should just screen every single play.
I think I saw
and
that.
And
yeah.
then on 3rd and 7 from, what was it? The Packers 40 on the final drive. 3rd and 7 on the Packers 40. If they don't get a first down, they risk setting up a 4th down that the Packers stop and then go down to win it with a Brandon McManus field goal. But nope. They just ran a screen to Jahmyr Gibbs for 7 yards to get a first down. Lions could do really whatever they wanted through the air last night. Were there some questionable calls? Absolutely. No doubt about it. Christian Watson wasn't trying to set a pick on his OPI. Clips are going around that the Lions did the same thing when they were actually trying to set a pick. Keyshawn Nixon called it a bogus call. Keyshawn Nixon said Amon-Ra St. Brown pushed off on that 16-yard completion on the final drive. But guess what? Refs are going to make mistakes if you think they did. It's a win in the win column for the Lions. It's a loss in the loss column for the Packers. Now the Packers are effectively out of the division race. Now they got to hope for the 5 or 6 seed so they don't got to play the Lions or the Eagles in the first round.
Right. I mean, and
they got to make the playoffs first.
Sure. And you look at the 4 games that the Packers have lost this year. Number one, the only team that they've lost to since September has been the Lions twice. So they've lost to a team that's got 1 loss, and then they've lost to Philadelphia, an elite team, and they've lost to Minnesota, an elite team. So, I mean.
So, Doug, let me ask you, are the Packers an elite team if they've lost to all those teams and haven't won?
No, they're not an elite team. I think they're a very good team.
Okay.
I think they're a very good team, but they're not an elite team because if you're an elite team, you have to win at least 1 of those, maybe 2 of them. If you're really an elite team, you'd win 3 of those games against other elite teams, but they've lost all 4 of them. So no, they're not an elite team. Very good team, very talented team. I think that they have left some points out there throughout the course of those 4 games that they have lost this season. I thought they played pretty well against the Lions at Ford Field on Thursday Night Football. Bright lights. The entire nation who has Prime watching, I suppose. There's a lot of attention on this game, as there should have been a lot of attention on this game. But there were some things that, like the slow start, getting off to that slow start, 5 penalties in the first half. They only had 2 in the second half, so that was better. I was fearful that it was going to be a flag fest because Detroit was flagged 5 times in the first half as well. But you look at, Detroit's third down efficiency, they were 46%, which is very good. The Packers were only 1 for 5 throughout the entire game on third down efficiency. And then 4th down, they were 80%, 4 for 5. Now, the Packers were able to cash in on the one that they were able to stop on the 31-yard line. They scored a touchdown there and went ahead, but it wasn't very long-lived. So there were some mistakes that the Packers made. There were some points that were left out on the field. There were some opportunities that were missed. But, yeah, I think the Packers are a very good team that is they're going to have to beat teams that are perhaps better than them when January rolls around if they're going to, get to New Orleans, they're not going to be predicted to go to New Orleans. But stranger things have happened.
Listen, they lost to the Eagles by 5. They missed a field goal in that game. We've talked about That game, the Vikings game where they lost by 2, Lions game, they lost by 10 the first time when they committed all those self-inflicted wounds, lost by 3 last night. They're not far away.
No, not at all.
I'm not poo-pooing on the Packers season. Like I said, I think they're a very good team, not only because of the 9 wins they do have, but because of how competitive and how close they've been against the cream of the crop in the NFC. But they are still the 4th best team in the NFC. They're not an elite team. They're not a legitimate Super Bowl contender. That being said, they have the capability to go in and knock off any one of those teams because of how close they've been. And, Matt LaFleur talked last night about how it's just a couple plays here and there. And he's right. If Christian Watson doesn't lose that fumble carrying the ball like LaShawn McCoy, a loaf of bread, that doesn't give the Lions 3 points on the ensuing drive. If Christian Watson doesn't commit the OPI or the refs don't call it, whatever you want to say, that might end in 7 points. If Keyshawn Nixon isn't called for illegal contact, which he called BS, and I was thinking about sending you that audio of Keyshawn Nixon, but we would get an FCC fine if we played it. So I didn't.
I can bleep it.
Okay, fair enough. Things can go different ways. It's not like the Packers lost by 28. The Packers are close. So I would not be surprised if they go on a deep run in the playoffs or even win. I would be surprised if they win the Super Bowl because it's the Super Bowl. But they're not far off. It's okay to say they're a very good team, not a great one yet. And I think that's accurate.
And you were
Feel free to disagree on the NicoletLaw.com talk and text line, 1-877-414. Is it 414?
No, it's just 877. It's 877-794-1973.
1-877-794-1973.
And I wouldn't know that if it wasn't, attached to the wall over here.
877-794-1973. Call or text in. Give us your thoughts. What is the Packers' ceiling? Are they still a contender? Let us know. Doug?
Listen,
we seem to be on the same page here.
I think we are, but you were a teenager the last time they did this, and I know that it's a recurring theme. Doug always brings up 2010. Doug always brings up 2010.
No, that's fine.
But if you want to look at 2010, which, that was the last time the Packers won the Super Bowl, at one point they were 8-6. They needed tiebreakers to get, there were only 6 teams from each conference that got into the playoffs that year. They were the 6th seed. They needed to win tiebreakers just to get there. They had to go on the road to Philadelphia. They weren't favored against the Eagles. They beat the Eagles. Then they had to go to Atlanta, the top seed, high-flying Atlanta Falcons offense. That game was over 3 minutes into the second half. The Georgia Dome was empty by the fourth quarter, except for Packers fans. And then they had to go and beat their arch rivals, the Chicago Bears, at Soldier Field. Game meant everything to all of the fans, and they went in there and they beat the Chicago Bears. In non-consecutive weeks, they had to go on the road to beat the number 1, number 2, and number 3 seed in the 2010 NFC playoffs. Then they had to go to Dallas to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that was also favored to win that game. The Packers got on a heater. Aaron Rodgers got on a heater, and they just played better football than everyone else when January rolled around. That's how they did it then, and they weren't favored in any of those games. So it can happen. You just have to play your best football when it matters the most.
Absolutely. And this is not us trying to brighten up your day. It's just accurate context, I believe. Look at where the Packers were at last season after their Week 14 game. They lost on Monday Night Football to Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants 24-22 to fall to 6-7 after back-to-back wins against the Chiefs and the Lions. Everyone thought, those 2 wins were a mirage. Packers might not even make the playoffs. Then they lost to the Buccaneers the next week, got blown out at Lambeau when Joe Barry just played zone all game and Baker Mayfield carved it up. 6-8. Packers are 9-4 right now, coming off a 3-point loss to the best team in the NFL, when they could have just as easily won that game. You're absolutely right, Doug. In this age, and we're part of the problem because we have a daily radio show and we cover the team on a daily basis, there needs to be a reaction and analysis of everything on a daily basis, every week. And that's fine. That's part of the job. There's an insatiable desire for daily content, especially with the team we cover. So we're going to sit here and say the Packers aren't elite yet. But guess what? We could be sitting in that same Ford Field press box on January, whatever it is, looking at Brandon McManus kicking a walk-off field goal and saying, were people really worried back in Week 14?
Maybe it's not even a walk-off. Maybe they just dominate. Maybe
there's a
listen.
lot
The Lions could have a
football.
clunker. The Lions could have a clunker like the Falcons did. The Falcons in 2010, they were the number 1 seed. Everybody in Atlanta was like, "All right, let's go." The trip to Dallas isn't that far from Atlanta. We're making our reservations now, and they got just boat raced.
Look at what the Packers did last year. That's why I brought up last season. After that loss to Tommy DeVito and the Giants, did you think, oh, the Packers are going to go in and curb stomp the Cowboys and then have a lead against the 49ers in the fourth quarter?
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Nope. Nobody did.
So that's that.
Yeah,
We'll break down more of the game after the break.
It just
when we come back.
Everything just has to fall into place. That's all. You just have to play your best football when it matters. That's it.
And Matt LaFleur said after the game, we're going to have to earn the right to come back here.
Yeah.
Meaning earn the right to play against Detroit. And that will likely require the Packers to win a game in Seattle or LA or Arizona or Atlanta or Tampa. But you'd much rather have to win a game in those places than in Philly or Detroit in the first round, in my opinion. So we'll see what the Packers do. We got a long week coming up ahead of their Sunday night game in Seattle next week. Another primetime game, another night of no sleep. I just took like a 3-hour nap on and off. So I got 2 hours of sleep last night. These night games are brutal for us. But guess what? Part of the job. Fantastic game to cover. Bill Huber turned to me in the press box last night and goes, man, what a job we have covering this. You get paid to watch that. That's awesome. Anyway, we'll continue diving into Packers lines and looking ahead after the break. Right here, it's the Matt Schneidman Show on the Game.
I need more time, but time can't be borrowed.
Iron Jock has you covered for Christmas. Now through December 15th. Buy $75 or more of the best performance gear on the planet and take 30% off your entire order with promo code THEGAME. If you know how to spell that. No spaces, THEGAME. Plus, you get a 3-pack of no-show socks for free. A $25 value bet. Use that as a stocking stuffer and go to ironjock.com for details. That's ironjoc.com. You see what I'm wearing right now?
Nice. There you go.
Iron. This fabric,
With
silver
ion
it's just
technology.
so light. It's cool enough to exercise in, which I'm going to do on my living room floor watching UNLV Boise State after we finish this show. But it also keeps you warm when you need it to.
Mhm.
It's like Iron Jock can sense whatever you need for the given weather, and it gets the job done. And that's not just me saying it because they pay to advertise on this station. It's me saying it because they're a pretty darn good product. James Pagel, please send me more free Iron Jock. I haven't gotten any this season.
I have one hoodie that I keep in my office here and one that I keep at home, and it is a staple. I use it all the time. It's my favorite hoodie. I love it. Can't get enough of it.
So we talked about the defense in the first segment. Let's talk about the offense. Now, we discussed how they got off to a slow start. Matt LaFleur lamented that after the game. Jordan Love lamented that after the game. Kirk Herbstreit, when I rewatched the game, said on the broadcast that the Lions blitzed on like 5 out of the first 7 dropbacks that Jordan Love had. For all that talk of, they're depleted in the front 7, well, Aaron Glenn had a solution for that. Don't just rush 4, just bring the house and see how the Packers handle it to compensate for maybe not having an Aiden Hutchinson or a DJ Reader or a Josh Paschal who can win their one-on-ones. And they pressured Jordan Love. ESPN Stats and Info had the stat that Love was pressured on 6 out of his 10 dropbacks in the first half, the highest such pressure rate in any half in his career, or any first half. I forget which one it was. He was uncomfortable to start. I don't think Jordan Love played poorly in the first half. 3-7 for 31 yards. He just didn't have that many opportunities. Coverage sack on the first play. Pressure into a throwaway, where Zadarius Smith may or may not have hit him in the head. And I think you know which one that is. But
Sure.
It didn't get called, so it didn't get called. They didn't set themselves up for enough third and manageables. They weren't good enough on first and second down. So you're in get back on track scenarios, and that's never going to work out consistently throughout a game. But then they come out in the second half, and remember last Thanksgiving when Jordan Love hit Christian Watson for 57 yards down the middle on the first play from scrimmage. 59 yards this time. Christian Watson did a nice job looking it in. Then they follow that up with the laser to Tucker Kraft, who's just a showman. The guy just puts on a show, gets rocked, just does it. I'm not a wrestling fan, but I think that's a Shawn Michaels move.
I believe it is. That's what. So I watch it in the boss's office with the big. It's got a huge jumbotron in there, and that's what I think Billy called it, the Shawn Michaels move.
Okay, excellent. Because Shawn Michaels actually quote tweeted it and gave Tucker Kraft a 10 out of 10.
There you go.
So Tucker Kraft, really nice catch on that laser. Jordan Love, picturesque throw. We saw in the second half why they're paying Jordan Love $55 million a year. I think the best play Jordan Love has had all season is when he evades the blitz from Jack Campbell. Josh Jacobs goes into the wrong gap to block. I'm not sure if, what he was supposed to do on the play. I'm assuming it wasn't what he did. Jack Campbell has a free run at Jordan Love. Love sidesteps him and just floats an absolutely perfect ball to Watson down the left sideline for 29 yards. We saw why Jordan Love is considered among the most talented quarterbacks in this league with what he did in the second half. Sure, he only threw, I believe, 13 passes in the second half, but he was much better than in the first half, and the offensive line gave him some more time, it looked like. So the offense came alive. They didn't have much room to run. Let me pull up the total rushing numbers right here. We talked about how the Packers were able to stuff the Lions. The Packers, on their end, 24 carries, 99 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. Josh Jacobs, 3 touchdowns obviously stand out, and getting him going in the red zone has really helped them convert some of these red zone opportunities into touchdowns. He's an unbelievable running back. Just durable, productive, everything. Offense was much better in the second half. Running game helped finish in the red zone, but it was through the air that they really moved the ball down the field, whether it was Dontavian Wicks, who I thought had a nice game, Jaden Reed had 1 target, 1 drop, no catches. He was a non-factor. I don't think he's hurt, which I wondered earlier because he played 50% of the snaps, but he played 50% 2 games ago. He's played in the 50s before this season. I think that's just how it was, which is a little confusing because I think he's our most talented receiver. We can talk about that later, but Watson played 42 out of the 50 snaps. Reed played 25. I think Wicks played 39, maybe somewhere in the 30s. But bottom line is, whether it was Kraft or Watson or Wicks, the passing game and Love, obviously, carried them in the second half. It just happened to be too little too late, but I have a hard time, Doug, putting too much blame on the offense when they put up 31 points. They take advantage of a really nice Keyshawn Nixon interception with 7 points. They take advantage of the defense's turnover on downs at the 31-yard line or 30-yard line, whatever it was, with 7 points. They just didn't make the biggest play when it mattered. And that was the Christian Watson OPI. Packers have an explosive offense. Jordan Love talked last night about how they can go toe-to-toe with the Lions, and I think they can.
Well, they did.
But they don't have the margin for error to start how they did against the best teams in the NFL.
Sure. And, you're talking about, you don't want to blame the offense. I mean, the defense, we talked about the 3rd downs and the 4th downs that Detroit was able to connect on. I guess some of the questions that I have about the Packers, and it's more of a gentle question than it was because it seemed like it used to be in the offseason going into the year, more of an urgent question or more of a question that had to be answered. But I'm still curious if they still are going to be a team that identifies a number 1 receiver, because we were talking about Jaden Reed before the season began. He had 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins, but he's been on a milk carton for about half the season. He's been in the games, but he hasn't been able to, put up what you would think of 1, 2, or at some point, even, with the game against the Lions, what a number 3 wide receiver would do. Or is it a guy like Tucker Kraft who's really emerged as not only a showman, but pretty damn good tight end and somebody who's going to, I think, have a long future in this league because he's
undoubtedly a second contract guy in Green Bay.
Oh, well, there's no question he's a second contract guy in Green Bay. I think that, if he continues to develop, he can turn himself into an elite tight end in the NFL. He's not there yet. He's in his 2nd season, but the early returns are really, really good. Dontavian Wicks has a lot. I agree with you. I think he had a nice game, and I think he's got a lot of upside as well. Christian Watson, there's still some ball security issues with him, but, he can also lift the top off of the defense as well. 4 receptions, 114 yards, including a couple of really long ones in that game. So I don't know if it's a question that needs to be answered, but, I'm just kind of still scratching my head saying, all right, they're winning all these games. They certainly, I don't believe, have a number 1 receiver. Maybe they don't need one. Maybe it's their tight end, but when you get that running game going, like you said, in the red zone, where they've had so many problems, or at least they had so many problems up until a couple of weeks ago, you get Josh Jacobs going in the red zone, a lot of those problems are solved. And some of the questions that we had in the offseason, they're not necessarily answering themselves yet, but maybe they're just not the concern that many of us thought they might be this late into the season.
Yeah, I don't think it's a concern because if you need Jaden Reed to step up and be a number 1 wide receiver and put up those numbers every game, then it would be a concern. But Christian Watson can do that. Tucker Kraft can do that. A couple guys can share the load. Jaden Reed still leads the Packers in catches by 5, targets by 3, and receiving yards by 129. And he has the 2nd most touchdown catches on the team. So he's still right up there. But it is interesting to see how in some games, like he did in the Cowboys game last year, like he did last night, he's just absent, but he's on the field for half the snaps. The game plan just doesn't call for him. I know this is looking too far into the future, but I'm fascinated to see which of these 4 wide receivers they retain on second contracts. My guess is they just bring back 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a discussion for another day, but we talk about Tucker Kraft. Man, among tight ends, 7th in receiving yards. He is 2nd in yards per reception. In yards after catch per reception, he's 1st. And in touchdown catches, he's tied for 2nd. He is a top 5 tight end in the NFL right now in his 2nd year in the league. You said he could be an elite tight end. He might already be one.
He might be.
He has a legitimate case for a Pro Bowl spot this year. I mean, George Kittle, Sam Laporta's up there. Brock Bowers might be the offensive rookie of the year. But you got Tucker Kraft, Trey McBride, George Kittle, Sam Laporta. Tucker Kraft could very well be a Pro Bowler this year in his second season. And it's funny to look back. Maybe funny is not the right word, but it's interesting to look back on the draft last year when they took Luke Musgrave in the second round and Tucker Kraft in the third. And we said, oh, Musgrave's the downfield threat. Matt LaFleur had that interview with NFL Network in training camp last year where he said Luke Musgrave logged the fastest speed in a practice one day. But whether it's the lacerated kidney or the ankle injury this year that required surgery or just ineffectiveness in the downfield passing game when he has been healthy, Luke Musgrave just hasn't been that guy. Tucker Kraft has been everything.
Well, they thought that he was going to be the blocker. Okay, so you pick tight ends in back-to-back rounds. Musgrave is going to be the guy who's going to be the one who leads the team, or at least the room, in receptions. And Kraft, he's going to be a road grader. No. I mean, that was the prevailing thought. And it's Musgrave just hasn't been able to get on the field for everything that you had mentioned there. Mm-hmm. But Tucker Kraft, I mean, you want to talk about a guy who, yeah, he's a third-round pick, so that's still a fairly high draft pick. There's still some draft capital that's going into Tucker Kraft there. But I think he's just someone who's so far exceeded so many expectations, maybe not that he had, maybe not that the coaching staff had, but I think everybody else that's kind of observing what this team has done over the last couple of years, he's exceeded their expectations, our expectations of what he can do. He's been great.
Another guy that has probably exceeded expectations, and I'm writing about this for Monday morning, Josh Jacobs. And
he had high expectations coming in.
And he's exceeded them.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, he led the NFL in rushing. You knew what you were getting. He was a little bit dinged up last year, as was obviously Aaron Jones, who missed more than half the season last year. But you're trading Jacobs. I mean, it wasn't a trade, free agent. But what you did when you traded basically Jacobs for Jones is you got 4 years younger and so much durability. You don't have the same fumble issues that Aaron unfortunately sometimes had, especially in some big moments. Josh Jacobs has been incredible for the Packers. I don't know. That's kind of what I thought that the Packers might be getting. So I'm not blown away by what Josh Jacobs has done because I knew that he was, at least in my mind, I knew that he was an elite running back coming into Green Bay. He's just been as good as I thought he was going to be because my expectations were really, really high, I guess.
Next Gen Stats put out last night, I think it was during the game, so I think the stat still stands because no other games have been played, that Josh Jacobs has forced more missed tackles than any ball carrier in the NFL this season.
He's maybe a little more elusive than I thought he might be.
Especially for how he's built.
Yeah.
You know, Adam Stenavich talked earlier in the week about how Jacobs is more of a downhill guy. Aaron Jones was more of a slasher, but I mean, Aaron Jones was good at yards after contact. Josh Jacobs is phenomenal at making guys miss. He's third in the NFL in rushing yards, 1,053 rushing yards. His yards per rush isn't as good as Saquon, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs. It's 4.4 yards per rush, still efficient. Rushing touchdowns. He had 4 rushing touchdowns in the first 10 games of the season. He has 7 in the last 3 games. 3, 1, 3. Now he's tied for 4th in the NFL in rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts has one more than him, actually, which is kind of funny.
That's funny.
And Josh Jacobs had a fumble in each of the first 2 games of the season. Bo Melton recovered the one against the Eagles in Brazil, and then he lost the one on the goal line against the Colts in week 2, has not fumbled since then. Josh Jacobs is a stud, and he's not going to be an all-pro because only one running back makes each all-pro team. I think they added a flex position, so maybe he will, but Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley are in a league of their own right now. Josh Jacobs, you could very well argue, is the 3rd best running back in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Jones was always on that top 10 level. He was probably underrated, but Josh Jacobs is undoubtedly elite. Undoubtedly elite. And if you look at yards after contact per rush, Josh Jacobs is 8th among running backs. That's pretty good.
It's very good. 100%. It's taken a special season. And listen, Saquon Barkley, another one of those guys who has had a couple of injuries over the years. The Giants obviously let him test the market. He goes to Philadelphia, and the prevailing thought in the NFL is the MVP is always going to be won by a quarterback. Well, it might not be won by a quarterback this
Why
year.
not?
Saquon Barkley is making absolutely his case for running back winning MVP, which, listen, for as great of a season as, for example, Josh Allen is having. I mean, you can make a strong argument for either one of those guys, but Saquon Barkley has been just incredible for Philadelphia, and Josh Jacobs has been incredible for Green Bay. It's been a fun season overall for the elite teams in the NFC to watch, all of them. Unfortunately, the Packers have lost all 4 of the games that they played against the other elite teams in the NFC this year.
By an average of 5 points per game.
Yeah, so they're in it. They're in it.
They're in it. They're just
got
a
to
step
close.
below.
Just got to close.
Let's talk some injuries. So Jair Alexander obviously misses his 3rd consecutive game with a PCL injury that he re-aggravated against the Bears. You would imagine he's going to be back with extra rest against the Seahawks next Sunday night. Romeo Doubs misses it with a concussion, his 2nd consecutive game that he's missed. You would imagine he'll be back. He was practicing all week, so he's at least progressing through the protocol. Although concussion recovery is not linear, could get worse after it gets better. Then a couple injuries during the game. Lucas Van Ness injured his thumb but came back. Evan Williams suffered a concussion. That'll be one to watch. And then Javon Bullard is probably the biggest concern. He injured his right ankle in the 3rd quarter, I want to say, and he could not put any weight on his right leg in the locker room after the game. He had to get a trainer to help him to the shower. He had to leave the locker room with his right foot in a boot on crutches. And you saw Javon Bullard not go over to safety when Evan Williams got hurt yesterday. Safety and nickel, 2 completely different positions. And I would imagine Javon Bullard practiced the entire week at nickel. So coaches didn't want to say, hey, Rook, go out there and play a position you did not practice all week. That would be too much for really any player. So that's why you saw Zane Anderson come in. And I didn't think he was bad. He had that really nice run stop on the 3rd down on the final drive, but you didn't see him just getting beat. I think he missed a tackle or 2, but I thought he was solid. Xavier McKinney said he really liked how Zane played. So it'll be interesting to see what the Packers go with, who they have against the Seahawks next Sunday night, in what could very well be the first of 2 Packers-Seahawks matchups in the next month.
Well, you can say the same thing about last night's game, too. I mean, you could see Detroit again. You could see Seattle again. It's and the AFC or the NFC West rather. I'm just a bunch of mediocre teams, and nobody's really
Midi is probably another good adjective to describe them.
Yeah, they're mid, as the kids say. Very mediocre. And you look at what's happened to San Francisco this year, just because of I wouldn't say just because of all the injuries, but that's certainly a huge contributing factor to why the 49ers have struggled as the defending NFC champions this year. But you're just waiting for somebody. Arizona looked like they were the belle of the ball for a little while. Now it's perhaps Seattle. Could be an interesting game coming up on Sunday night. Should be a good game. I think it'll be a good one.
After the break, we're going to look at the Packers' remaining schedule. What record are they going to finish with? Are they going to fall to the 7? Is there any chance they miss the playoffs entirely? What's their path ahead? We'll discuss that as we wrap up this Friday edition of the Matt Schneidman Show right here on The Game. All right, Doug, we got to talk about what has been the biggest radio talking point of the day. And my duty as a print journalist first has been to not talk about this until the end of the show. And this is no shame to any other show. But I just don't think it mattered in the grand scheme of things. It's not why the game happened the way it did. And on this show, we talk about why the game happened the way it did. And I was on a couple shows today, and on multiple, the first thing I was asked about was this. And here's my take on it. And I think everyone knows what I'm about to talk about. It is so ridiculous that it's almost funny. It is funny. Matt LaFleur did not think so. It is so absurd that I could not help but chuckle. One of the Lions fans holding the flag for the anthem, throat slashing the Packers sideline. And I did not see this in real time. I saw the clip going around online of Matt LaFleur telling him to F off. And then I think it was Bo Melton, maybe Josh Jacobs was getting in his face, and Joe McKillop, who is one of Matt LaFleur's right-hand men on staff, along with Darryl Franklin, getting in between them. Just outrageous. It's just so absurd.
Yeah.
Matt LaFleur didn't seem too pleased about it. Here's what the Packers head coach had to say about the incident after the game.
Yeah, I've never been a part of something like that. He was talking junk to our players, giving them the throat slash sign. And you're trying to de-escalate it, and then he gets in my face. So I thought it was pretty unsportsmanlike. Like, I've never seen that. I've been on many fields, and usually they police that much better. I thought it was an arrogant fan that, wanted to get in part of the action, and just, I would like to see security or something step in there and get him out of there, because he shouldn't be doing that.
If I can't help but laugh, it's just so absurd.
Is
Is it the proper thing to do? Of course not. But nobody got hurt. And if the guy's objective was to get his 15 minutes of fame and never be invited back to hold the American flag at Ford Field, he accomplished what he did. There's a screenshot going around of him giving the middle finger, forget if it was the double bird or just single bird, to the Packers sideline. That's an image you'll have for the rest of your life.
It is. You're going to put that on your Christmas cards, maybe? Because
ironically, wearing a Brian Branch jersey, the guy who
Perfect.
did the double bird to the Lambeau crowd.
Well, did you see in pregame, some of the Lions players were wearing a picture of the double bird that he, the two-finger salute, double rods.
Yeah, Kirby Joseph ran out of the tunnel for his pregame intro, holding that shirt up in the air like it was the Lion King.
Yeah. So, okay. Congratulations. Like you said, you'll never be allowed to hold the American flag in public ever again, or be invited to hold the American flag in public again. What a great thing to, display for your patriotism of the country. You're chosen to hold the flag on the field before the biggest game of the regular season on Thursday Night Football, and you do that. The only thing that
I'll just say it. It's funny.
It's funny. It's hilarious. But the only thing that could have been, I just didn't want LaFleur to get into any kind of trouble, either from the league or anything else, or
There's no way.
Well, I'm just saying you don't want it to escalate. And I think Matt LaFleur, I don't care that he told him to, get the F off the field or anything else that LaFleur did. It was fine. I just didn't want it to get any worse for him, to take him out of a headspace or anything like that, or for the league to say, you know what, maybe you went a little bit far. He didn't go too far. I just didn't want him to go too far.
Yeah, Matt LaFleur and the Packers have all the right in the world to respond how they did. Sure. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they're soft. What are you just going to do? Sit there and stand there?
Yeah.
And wilt while a fan throat slashes you? That's part of what makes this rivalry, what makes this game so great, is the entertainment. That's entertainment. You're not just supposed to sit there like statues. Players and coaches are humans too. If someone's giving you the throat slash, you're going to respond. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's entertainment. No one got hurt. Maybe the guy clearly went over the line, but it was unacceptable going over the line, I'll say. It's just entertainment. That's what that is.
Yeah. I didn't know about it until after the game. I didn't clock it in real time by a long shot when LaFleur was asked about it after the game. So what happened before the game that I missed? And then I went back and it was on social media, as most things wind up being on social media. That was the only thing that, if it was a concern, that was it. But you don't want LaFleur to give him the bird or anything like that, because then the league will say, well, why, you have to understand that you're an example, blah, 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 and you can't do that and all that other stuff. And he didn't. LaFleur was fine. But I don't have a problem with anything that Matt or anybody on the Packers sidelines did. It was it was a weird moment. That's all.
That's all it was. All right, very quickly before we get out of here and send you off to your weekend, Packers got 4 games left. They're 9-4. One more win probably gets them in the playoffs. 2 more wins probably gets them the 5 or 6 seed. They have the Seahawks in Seattle on Sunday Night Football, the New Orleans Saints the following Monday night at Lambeau, the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota, and then the Bears at Lambeau. They should win at least 2 of those games against the Saints and Bears. Packers should get the 5 or 6 seed. They'll go into the NFC South or NFC West winner. I would imagine they win that game, but you never know. That's just my prediction. And then you got to play Philly or Detroit again.
Yep.
It's time to muscle up and win one of those games. Packers can. They're just not there yet. But like you said, Doug, all that matters in the NFL. And we saw this the last time the Super Bowl was played in New Orleans. Is getting hot at the right time. Can the Packers do it? We shall see down the stretch. We appreciate everybody for listening. As always, enjoy your weekend. He's Doug Russell. I'm Matt Schneidman. We'll talk to you on Monday.